Okay. Oh, excuse me. A piano in your school?
No, we had a Victrola, and we sang. Always loved music. We sang two Victrola records, and the old Susanna, and those kind of songs. And of course, I still remember all the words. And I remember one of my friends. She was a year older, and she and I sang White Christmas at our Christmas program one year. And we always had a little piece to memorize and say and all that kind of stuff.
Were the desks attached to the floor?
They were on runners, but I believe the runners were attached, yes.
What kinds of supplies did your school have? Many books? You've already talked about the chalkboard.
Yeah. Well, McGuffey readers, but I do know that the parents had to buy new books, every year, like a work type book and things like that. So I can remember Mom going into town to buy the books. We did not have a library. I don't even think we had a set of encyclopedias that I remember, and so it was pretty minimal what was there. We didn't miss anything because we didn't know. We didn't know we were supposed to have other stuff.
How about items like pencils and chalk and crayons? Did your parents furnish those
Yes,
too?
yes. And I loved to get the new box of crayons, and I would take really good care of my crayons. Some kids, tear all the paper off and then they break, but I would take really good care of my crayons because I love to color, and I liked you'd open a new box and you'd get that smell and all. So I loved having my new crayons.
And where would your parents have purchased those things?
We had a 5 and dime store.
Tell me how the teacher organized the school's day's lessons.
Well, we usually had, almost always had 8 classes, and the reason was because just a mile away was a little village called Ross, and so quite a few children came from that little village of Ross. So we had one of the bigger country schools or in that area, but so she, often had all 8 classes, and she would put on the board what the older children should start to work on, put a schedule up, what they could read in social studies and what they could do in math and that kind of thing. And then she would start working with the little kids and usually bring us up to the recitation bench. I forgot to mention we had a recitation bench. And, it was usually reading and phonics and she'd work with us, and then we always had a workbook. And I said our county superintendent's name was Miss Rendelman, and she would come around probably 2 to 3 times a year and visit. And I was always scared to death when she'd come, and she was nice. I realize now she was nice, but I was scared to death. And she would come and sit down beside you and say, "Okay, let's look at your reading workbook," and so then she'd go through like that.
So she knew each one of you.
Yes,
Personally.
yes.
Did you have the same county superintendent
All the years. Mm-hmm. All the years.
How did the day's experience vary between the grade levels? Maybe we can think more about the younger ones and older ones.
Of course, the subject matter varied. they would start science and social studies and stuff more like 3rd, 4th grade. And of course in the lower grades we didn't have that. The older kids did an awful lot of work on their own, but she would bring them up and they would go to the recitation bench too, and it was kind of neat. The little kids could listen in, and you'd be surprised what you would pick up and learn from just hearing them talk and discuss about it. I must confess, I told you I was not good in math, and I was up to the board one time, and she had us turned around with our back to the board, and she would ask a question. And the one question she asked me was, how many feet in a mile? And I thought, and I did not know how many feet were in a mile. Well, one of the boys that I kind of liked, and he kind of liked me, he wrote it down on a piece of paper and held it up for me. And so then I turned around and wrote it on the board. Oh, jeez. Memories.
How many students were in your grade?
In my grade, oh, just 2. A boy named Paul and I went all the way through grade school and high school together. We graduated together. And he was a farm boy, and then he farmed, and he and I shared. I was very good in reading, and he was not, and he was very good in math, and I was not, so we kind of made quite a team there.
Then how many children were in the school?
Well, I would say there was probably usually 15 would be a good average. When you stop and think of a teacher having 15 students in 8 different classes, I cannot imagine how much time they spent, thinking about their lessons and all. Wonderful, wonderful teaching. I think I got a very good education. And when we went into high school, it was always the country kids that were the top students. Our valedictorian and salutatorian were both country kids, and then, the rest of us, I wasn't that high, but I think I was 6th or 8th or something in my class. And, most all of those kids were country students, because we learned how to work on our own and dig it out on our own. So.
Do you remember some lesson activities that you did as a
Lesson
child?
activity. Do I have anything down on that?
I'm on the 2nd page. About the 5th one, 6th one down
wait a
under
minute,
school
I
lessons.
have the wrong page here. Okay. What were some of the activities you remember? Oh yes, I do. When I was just little, I read a story, and I don't know whether it was in one of the McGuffey readers or a different one, but a story about a little elephant that could stand on its head. And do you know, I can still remember that, and I can see that cute little baby elephant in the picture standing on its head.
Isn't that something?
So, and I did a lot of reading because I was good. You do what you are good at, instead of working on what you should work on. I did love geography. I loved drawing maps freehand. We did quite a lot of that, drawing maps by freehand. Now, I was going through my grade reports, and I often saw that I didn't get really high grades in geography, but I still like it. So, and I've always enjoyed history too, from grade school on through college. I enjoyed history, and I love history programs on TV today. So that was always an interest of mine.
And you already told me your least favorite would have been
Math.
Because
I just have a really hard time remembering, like you have to remember how to do fractions, and I never could remember how to do the fractions and all that. I just am not good in math to this day. So
How much did you interact with other students?
yeah, a lot, because we went to school, you know, for most of the kids stayed put. There wasn't a lot of change in who was in the school, and so you got to be really good friends. And I had this little town, this little village of Ross. My best friend came from there. Her name was Alice Ann. Everybody was called by two names. Alice Ann, and she was 1 grade younger than me, but we were real close. And one time I remember in the summer, my dad always went to the state fair, and I, you know, older, I'm sure we were in high school, and I got to take Alice Ann with me to the state fair. So yeah, we did a lot. We, you know, jumped rope. Somebody had to turn, you know, and play Annie over, and so yeah, lots of softball. We played lots of softball, and the older kids were even good about letting the little kids play. You know, they'd let them be a fielder or something, you know, and so.
Did your teacher ever have any helpers?
No.
What kinds of rules did you have in your classroom?
Well, you didn't speak without permission. You would raise your hand to speak. You would raise your hand for permission to go to the outhouse, and you didn't use it very often. I mean, you know, she would deny it if you asked too often. I really don't remember discipline problems. The kids, even the older boys, and some of the boys were pretty good sized, you know, and some of the teachers were kind of little, but I just really don't remember them causing problems. Back then, if you got in trouble at school, you got it a lot worse at home, and so there just weren't the discipline problem. People, they didn't, you know, talk out like kids do today and stuff like that.
So you don't remember any discipline? You don't know what kinds of techniques your teacher did to reinforce?
No, I think just at the beginning of the year, stating what they were and probably what would happen. I don't ever remember anybody having to stand in the corner or anything like that. We certainly did not have a dunce cap. I think that was a terrible thing, and we didn't ever have anything like that. Oh, another thing, we had to keep our feet out of the aisles so that people didn't trip. And you couldn't just run over to the teacher's desk, you know, you had to raise your hand. And
Tell us about lunchtime.
well, it was an hour long, which was nice. And of course we ate at our desk, and you know, the kids would bring, some of the kids, there were some farms really close, and they might go home, and I would go home in nice weather. I'd ride my horse, Lady K, to school and put her out, and she would keep all the grass mowed in the ditches. And then I'd ride home for lunch and come back, because we had an hour. But in the winter time, oh, it was sledding. Everybody would bring their own sleds, and as I said, it's on a hill, so we had a great hill, and that hill went down to my farm, and there was just a little rise by my farm, and we'd sometimes shoot right over that little hill and keep going. And some of the older kids, this is another nasty, some of the older kids would have watches, and when it was almost time for the bell, we'd get ready and we'd slam off just as hard as we could and maybe end up a half a mile away, and then you'd have to walk back and be late. So, yes. And we played lots and lots of softball, and the girls, you know, we got pretty good at hitting the ball too, and so it was fun. And like I said, it was an hour long, so we got some pretty good exercise.
Would the parents ever bring a hot meal in?
No, they didn't bring it, but as I said, we had that big stove. And sometimes the teacher would say, okay, Ellen, you bring a carrot, and Alice Ann, you bring a potato, and so forth. And we'd end up with vegetable soup
Stone soup.
that we made. That was pretty good.
What did you carry your lunch in?
Well, the beginning it was an old lard can, and then later on I did have the typical black lunch pail, and with a thermos, and in the winter I always had milk, and then in the winter Mother would usually have it be cocoa, and so I'd have something hot, and sandwiches. I don't remember if we ate a lot of peanut butter. I honestly can't remember. I can remember sometimes when I guess Mother couldn't think of anything else, she'd fry an egg real hard, you know, and squash out the yolk and everything until it was fried hard. And actually that makes a pretty good sandwich. And I'm sure we had a lot of meat sandwiches because we always ate meat every day.
How did your school day end?
Well, we had to clean up the room, and then I really can't remember anything in particular. I suppose if there was any special thing, the teacher would remind us about it or remind us to take a note home or whatever. Then sometimes you would get picked to sweep the floor, and you know, we thought that was lots of fun because you use sweeping compound and you'd sprinkle the sweeping compound around, and then you'd get to sweep it up, and again, I liked the smell of that. That was kind of oily, made the floor look nice and shiny. We had nice oak floors in there, hardwood oak floors, and then you could sometimes stay and wash the chalkboards and bang the erasers, go outside and bang the erasers. But you didn't always do those things. That's once in a while.
So you were always in the same school, but you
Yes.
had different teachers.
Yes, yes.
Can you name all the teachers?
Yes, I all except 5th grade because I lost that. Okay. In 1st, 2nd, and 3rd grade.
But you did have kindergarten.
Yes, and that was Miss Reynolds,
Okay.
the one that walked through the snowstorm.
Okay.
1st, 2nd, and 3rd grade was the same, and this is the only teacher I had that long, and her name was Ruby Von Heater.
Will you spell that for me?
Yeah, okay. Von, V-O-N, and then capital Heeder.
Okay.
And I really, really liked her. She was very understanding. In one report card she said she's too young for her grade. and I was, I guess. 4th, I had Catherine Hillier, and that's Hillier.
And was Catherine with a K or a C?
Yeah, Catherine with a K. And I don't remember who I had in 5th because I don't have that report. 6th grade was Margaret Johnson, and I had in another note I had here. She was a very young teacher and wasn't very good. Didn't really know how to do things very well. And then 7th grade was Margaret Newell, Newell, and Margaret Newell was a neighbor. She lived over on the, okay, we were sort of on the east end of the mile, and she lived right on the west end. She faced the highway. Highway US 71 goes through Audubon, and she lived over there. She had a son named Darrell, and so she taught him part of the time. But she was also a very big favorite, and I only had her 1 year. Then, maybe this was 5th grade, but like I said, I had a man teacher. His name was Mr. Horning, and I don't know what his first name. And then he had to go to the service, and he left in December after Christmas. And then we had,
Would that have been 41?
yeah,
Okay.
yeah. And I bet you he was my 5th grade teacher.
Okay.
I bet he was. And then a Lois Sundberg filled in the other half year. Now I want to tell you a story about Mr. Horning. Okay, he was a good teacher. I liked him. And when I came to Iowa State Teachers, lo and behold, there was Mr. Horning getting, I'm sure, his BA. And there were several of us from Audubon that went to Iowa State Teachers. And I remember one time riding home. He had a car, nobody else did, and riding home with him. And that was kind of a funny feeling, you know, to think he was my teacher, and now here we are, students together, you know.
Suppose he was on the GI Bill?
Probably, yeah, I'm sure he was. And I have no idea what he did after he graduated, whether he taught in Iowa. I don't have any idea. And then the 8th grade teacher was named Norma Rasmussen. And I really don't remember a lot about her, except I know we drilled hard for our 8th grade examination. But I was really, when I got going through, I was surprised that we had so much change all the time. Like I only had that one teacher for 3 years. Otherwise, everybody else was just 1 year. Which to me was kind of surprising, really. In the Depression, that they didn't stay, you know, for a job. I don't
So the
I don't
same
think
kids,
any
but
of them
new
were
teachers.
told they weren't
Oh, okay.
offered a contract that I know of.
Mhm.
Of course, kids, you know, we weren't told a lot back then, you know, so it could have been, I suppose. But outside of that, Margaret Johnson, I think all the rest of them did very well.
Was it Johnson or Johnston?
Johnson.
Okay. Did you remember seeing your teachers outside of the school day?
No, outside of Margaret Newell, who was our neighbor. I'd sometime even ride my horse over there and talk to her in the yard, out in her yard. But no, the rest of them, they just kind of seemed to disappear. I don't know where they went. None of them belonged to my church, that at least that I know of. So.
Did anyone help the teacher take care of the schoolhouse other than the jobs that you students had?
Well, there were farmers. They mowed. And in the summer, there was always a farmer that would put up an electric fence and have cows in there to keep it down. But that they had like a board, and they would, you know, repair, put on a new roof if it needed.